This is my doom drawer. You've seen one. Every house has one. The drawer where every random cable ends up, and it's my nightmare every time I pull it open to find something, because I always have to dig through a tangled mess. My wife has tried to organize it a few times, but that peace never lasts. It's that I should throw this out, but what if I need it situation. In here, there's that wide flat cable for an ancient printer. There's a chunky square connector for a digital camera you haven't touched since 2011, but the cable stays because the brain refuses to let it go. And of course, there are like 5 different phone chargers, so when you forget yours at work and your battery's dying, borrowing one is basically a 20% chance of success. For about 20 years, connecting devices has been a mess. Confusing, annoying, and never working the way you want. But then, almost overnight, everything changed. A tiny oval-shaped plug showed up and started retiring everybody else. It took over laptops, headphones, game consoles, and eventually, after a very dramatic standoff, even the iPhone finally gave in. Yep, USB-C. And sure, the obvious upgrade is you can plug it in either way. This thing takes it from any side, meaning you don't have to flip the cable 3 times hoping it finally decides to cooperate. But is USB-C really just about easier charging, or is there more power hiding inside that little connector? Today, we're breaking down the surprisingly wild history of the one port to rule them all, right here on Simple But Surprising. To understand why USB-C feels like a small miracle, you have to remember what the 1990s were like. Back then, the back of a computer looked intense, just a bunch of different ports, and you were expected to know what each one did. Your mouse had its own port, the printer had a different one, keyboards had their own thing, joysticks too. None of it was interchangeable, so if you didn't have the exact right cable, you weren't figuring it out. You were just not using that device today. And sometimes, even when you plugged it in correctly, the computer still acted like it didn't notice. The fix? Restart the whole thing. Just to connect one device, then USB showed up, Universal Serial Bus, and it was a big deal. The promise was simple. One standard plug that could work for a lot of different stuff. Fewer cables, fewer headaches, less guessing. For a while, it actually delivered. We got USB Type A, the classic rectangle everyone knows. The only catch was it had a right side up. And somehow your hand would always choose the wrong way first. But as gadgets got smaller, that big Type A plug started feeling too bulky. So the industry tried to scale it down. First came mini USB, then micro USB, except the world didn't switch over cleanly. Printers kept using that square Type B plug. External hard drives showed up with that odd 2-level micro B connector that looked complicated for no reason. And micro USB was the same story as USB-A, just on hard mode. It's smaller, fussier, and somehow you still choose the wrong side first. You line it up, nope. You flip it, still, nope. Then you flip it back, and it slides in like it was easy the whole time. By around 2013, the dream of one universal cable felt dead. We were back to a drawer full of random cords, slightly different shapes, slightly different purposes, and when you needed one, you'd grab the wrong one first, every time. That's when the big tech companies, Apple, Intel, Microsoft, HP, basically said, okay, we can't keep doing this forever. They went back to the drawing board, not to make yet another temporary plug, but to build something that could actually last. And that's where the next chapter begins. In 2014, the USB group, the people who decide what USB even is, finally dropped the answer, USB Type-C. At first glance, it doesn't look like much. It's small, oval, kind of like a cleaner, more modern version of micro USB. But inside, it's a totally different beast. Old school USB 2.0 connectors were simple. They had just 4 tiny pins, enough for basic power and basic data. That's it. No extra tricks. USB 3.0 got more ambitious and bumped that up to 9 pins so it could move data faster. Then USB-C showed up and said, cool, how about 24? 24 pins packed into that little oval. That's why it can handle so many jobs without turning into a mess. And the smartest part is the layout. It's symmetrical. Top and bottom are basically mirrored, which is why there's no right side up. You can plug it in either way. When you connect it, the cable and the device do a quick handshake, like, okay, which way are we facing? And the device instantly routes everything to the correct pins. You don't notice any of that. You just experience the magic. It works. A couple years earlier, Apple had already popularized a reversible connector too, Lightning. But Lightning stayed in Apple's world. iPhone and iPad only. USB-C was built as the shared language. Phones, tablets, laptops, headphones, game consoles, everybody can use it. And those 24 pins aren't just there so you can stop doing the awkward cable flip dance. They're there because USB-C is built to handle more than one job at a time. Some pins handle power, some handle data, and some are basically the talking pins. So the cable and device can agree on what's about to happen. Are we charging? Are we sending video? And do it safely. And once you have that, you unlock the feature that makes USB-C feel unfair to older ports, alternate mode. Alternate mode is basically USB-C saying, if you want, I can stop acting like a normal USB cable and become something else. On a lot of laptops, USB-C means you can ditch that old chunky charger brick and use a simple USB-C charger instead. And it's not just for charging. Through the same port, it can also send video to a monitor. Plus, it can carry audio and move big files much faster than older USB. And once USB-C could do all that, it wasn't just a convenient plug anymore. It was the first time a single port could realistically replace a whole bunch of other ports. Which sounds great until you hit the next question. Okay, it can do more, but can it do enough power to replace that big, heavy laptop charger? That's where the story gets good. Now we get to USB-C's real finishing move, USB-C Power Delivery, or PD. Older USB charging was weak, like New Year's resolution week. Classic USB was pushing around 2.5 watts, enough to charge a phone slowly. That's why old USB never really worked for bigger devices. USB-C completely changes the rules, because now the charger can actually negotiate with whatever you plug in. Phone, tablet, laptop, all of it. And a big reason it works across so many devices is a tiny smart chip inside some USB-C cables called an e-marker. Here's the thing. When you plug USB-C in, the power brick doesn't just blast power and hope for the best. It actually talks to your device through the cable for a second and they agree on a plan. It's basically the charger going, all right, how many watts can you handle before I turn this up? And your phone or laptop goes, here's my limit. Please don't cook me. So the system starts in a safe default. With a basic cable, it'll often stick to something like 15 watts. Basically, slow and steady, nobody gets hurt. But if your cable is built for more, that's when the e-marker steps in. Think of it like the cable's little certification badge. It tells both sides, relax, I'm rated for higher power, you can safely turn it up. And that's how modern USB-C can scale from tiny gadgets to bigger ones. If it's earbuds, it just sips a little power. If it's a laptop, USB-C can go all the way up to 240 watts. Yeah, 240 watts through that tiny oval connector, that's a lot of power for something that fits in your pocket. Which is why so many modern laptops don't need that old school charger with the heavy brick and the round plug anymore. They just charge through the same USB-C port you already use for everything else. Quick takeaway, if you buy a 240 W-rated USB-C cable, you're basically buying the works in most situations option. It's backward compatible so it can still charge smaller devices safely. But if you buy a weaker cable, that's where the annoying moments happen. One cable, almost everything. But if USB-C is this good, why did the most popular phone on earth, the iPhone, say no for nearly a decade? That's where the next chapter gets spicy, Apple versus the European Union. All right, here's what was really going on with the iPhone. Apple wasn't avoiding USB-C because it didn't work. They were avoiding it because Lightning gave them something way more valuable, control. And what makes this extra funny is Apple wasn't anti-USB-C in general. They actually brought USB-C to laptops pretty early. In 2015, Apple shipped a MacBook that charged through USB-C. But on the iPhone, they held on to Lightning like it was a family heirloom. And the reason wasn't some secret technical limitation. It was control and money. Because when Apple owns the port, Apple owns the rules. They get to decide which accessories are officially allowed, how they're made, and who gets to sell them in the Apple universe. And if you want to play in that universe, you pay the toll. Meanwhile, the European Union was focused on a completely different problem: e-waste. Think about how this usually goes. You buy a new phone, and your old cables don't match anymore. So you buy new ones, the old ones go into the doom drawer, and eventually into the trash. Over time, that adds up. EU estimates pointed to around 11,000 tons of e-waste from discarded or unused chargers every year. So the EU decided to stop the madness at the source. They passed the common charger rule. If you sell certain portable devices in the EU, the charging port needs to be USB-C. And the deadline was real. From the 28th of December 2024, the rule applies to phones and a bunch of other handheld electronics sold in the EU. That's a checkmate kind of move, because Apple can't just shrug and skip Europe. It's one of the biggest markets on Earth. So Lightning's days were numbered. And then it happened. With the iPhone 15, Apple switched to USB-C, and Lightning officially started heading toward the museum section. Which means USB-C finally became what it always promised to be: a real shared standard across phones, tablets, laptops, headphones, the whole crew. But before we throw a party, there's one last twist. Because USB-C may look like one port, but not every USB-C cable is actually the same. And that's where Chapter 5 gets sneaky. So, is USB-C perfect? Almost. But there's a sneaky trap. USB-C can do so many jobs that people assume every USB-C cable is the same, and that's where people get burned. Because yeah, you can grab a cheap USB-C cable at a gas station, plug it in, and it fits. Most USB-C cables look basically identical at a glance, so you assume they'll all behave the same. But then you actually use it and realize, oh, this one charges like it's doing you a favor. And video? Forget it. Your monitor is gonna sit there like, I'm not seeing a signal, buddy. That's because USB-C is just the shape. It doesn't automatically tell you what the cable can handle. And I guarantee this has happened to someone. You grab a random USB-C cable from an Android phone, plug it into a MacBook Pro for a quick charge, and you're like, nice, same plug, I'm saved. Then 20 minutes later you look up and the battery is basically the same, or it's still draining. Because that phone cable might be rated for something like 25 watts, while a MacBook Pro often needs at least around 60 watts to charge normally. So the plug fits, but the cable just isn't built for the job. That's the trap. USB-C looks universal, but the results depend on the cable you grabbed. Here's the simplest way to think about it. Some USB-C cables are basically phone-only cables. They're fine for basic charging and basic data. Speeds can be old school USB 2.0 slow, and they usually can't do video at all. Then you've got fast charging USB-C cables made for power delivery, so they're built to handle the higher power laptops want. They'll still work with phones too, but they're designed for bigger jobs. And then there are the full-featured cables, the ones that do the whole package. Fast charging, faster data, and video output, so you can run a monitor through USB-C without any weird surprises. After that, you get into the speed demons, USB 4 cables for really fast data and higher-end setups, and then Thunderbolt cables, which are the premium do everything, do it fast option. Great for docks, high-end monitors, and super fast external drives. So yeah, USB-C is one connector, but it's not one guaranteed experience. But here's the good news. Even with that confusion, we've still made it to a better world. Because now you can travel with a laptop, a tablet, a phone, headphones, and realistically bring one type of cable and one type of charger, instead of packing your entire doom drawer in a suitcase. And if you want the simplest just works move, get a 240 watt USB-C cable, the superhero one. It's usually not much more expensive, but it gives you the most flexibility across devices. Your phone will still only take what it needs, your laptop can get what it asks for, and you're way less likely to run into that "why isn't this charging" moment. And honestly, after 20 years of digging through cable spaghetti, that's a simple thing worth celebrating. If you like these simple but surprising deep dives, hit like, it helps the channel a ton. And tell me in the comments, what's the oldest, weirdest cable you still have sitting in your doom drawer?